What's good, y'all? Quamax64, we're back at it like a crack at it. Today we got a new video, we got a new channel. It's Tier Zoo. Never seen any of the videos, but I have seen a channel before. It looked a little interesting also as well. I actually really love learning about animals. So this should be good. This should be bussin'. Hopefully guys enjoy it. If you do, you already know what to do. The Jack Jumper Ant. Never heard. Oh snap. And I got the Overwatch. I joined not that small thing, not that spider.
One of the most broken factions the game has ever seen. Nowhere else in nature will you find
What
such
the?
an incredible concentration of abilities that are not only overpowered, but also extremely unique. It's tough to even know where to start when talking about what makes insects such a successful group. Because in a lot of cases, it's not just that their individual abilities are overpowered.
Fight back.
I feel like they should be mutually exclusive, since they're just insanely OP when used in combination with one another. You'll see what I mean once I get into the tier list, but first, a brief overview of the insect faction's general attributes and history.
Okay.
Insects
This looks like it's
were
gonna be
the
fire.
during the early Carboniferous expansion. The devs bumped up the atmospheric oxygen level, which allowed members of the arthropod faction to adopt larger sizes and more costly abilities. And while most of the arthropod player base was trying to dominate the land by leveling up their size, a small offshoot of the crustacean player base opted to forego the gigantism trait and instead used this oxygen bonus to unlock an ability never before seen in game: flight.
I like the way how he's comparing this to a video game. It's definitely making it more enjoyable.
Because these new creatures were the very first to gain the ability to fly, the air became entirely their domain for the time being, and would remain that way.
They just stole us food?
Unlock the abilities
Couldn't have been me.
later. Insects are extremely diverse in their abilities and stat spreads. In fact, they're so diverse that it's impossible to include them all in a single video. I'll be keeping things fairly generalized, but truth be told, many of the groups we'll be discussing today have so many standout members that they could easily be an entire tier list in and of themselves. So it's a little tough to pin down their general attributes, but there are a few commonalities. Being members of the arthropod faction, all insects are granted the exoskeletal armor perk, which greatly raises their AC compared to soft-bodied builds of similar sizes, with the only downside being a massive reduction in those same defensive stats for a short time every time the player levels up. This makes insects quite tanky on average, allowing them to excel in combat. The insect build also has access to the compound.
I don't think the cat want any problem with that. Praying
vastly
Mantis.
Improved awareness compared to other arthropods like scorpions and centipedes. With 360-degree vision, their ability to avoid obstacles, dodge attacks, and pursue targets while flying is far superior to most other flyers. This enhanced perception perk is important because insects tend to have naturally high stealth, so in order to compete with other insect builds, acute vision is required. We've only just scratched the surface of the insane abilities insects
They be going crazy in the animal
For a
kingdom.
more in-depth look, let's get into the tier list.
Alright, let's get it.
At the bottom of the
Silverfish.
tier list, we have the silverfish.
What is
The silverfish is the most primitive insect build still in existence. It kind of blurs the line between what is and is not considered an insect, and not in a good way. Unlike other flightless insects, which decided to respec and drop the flight ability in favor of more refined strategies, the silverfish build actually never had access to it in the first place. Aside from having an exoskeleton, they don't really have any of the abilities that make insects powerful. They do not have wings and have essentially no combat abilities. They have fairly...
Oh, I ain't even see it. Nah, that's some crazy camouflage. I ain't even peeped that. Hold on, I ain't even. Nah.
powerful. They do not have wings and have essentially no combat abilities.
Yeah.
Fairly low defenses and get bodied left and right.
I love animal videos.
With their only useful stat being their decently high movement speed. Their special ability allows them to gain XP from eating cellulose and lignin, meaning they can farm XP from wooden structures, which normally don't grant any experience. This ability would be fairly powerful in forest biomes, but because they're such weak combatants, they tend can farm XP from wooden structures, which normally don't grant any experience. This ability would be fairly powerful
I can see
in
it
forest
now.
biomes, but because
That's good.
they tend to actually stick to urban areas, feeding on things like paper and cloth in the relative safety of houses, apartments, and office spaces.
It seems like silverfish would be
Even
an
there, they aren't completely
easy
safe,
meal.
though. And while no build is ever truly safe in the insect meta, the silverfish's extreme lack of useful abilities places it firmly.
Dang.
That's honestly the only insect build I believe deserves an F tier.
Bro, that Drake got killed so quick.
Truly
Bruh.
safe in the insect meta,
Nah, I look like it's
the
definitely
silverfish's
free.
extreme lack of
It's
useful
free.
abilities
That joint
places it
free.
firmly in F
That
tier.
joint is free.
That's honestly the only insect build I believe deserves an F tier ranking.
Holy.
Most insects are quite viable, and even the less viable ones tend to have at least a few useful things going for them, even if those things aren't necessarily broken.
The walking
First, in D
stick.
tier, we have the Phasmid build, which includes walking sticks
Yeah,
and leaf.
I think I've seen these before.
These builds sport what are unquestionably some of the
Yeah,
most
I definitely
impressive
seen it, yeah.
camouflage abilities in the entire game, second only to color-changing builds like the Octopus and Chameleon.
Yeah, that's
As
crazy.
impressive as these are, though, the question I constantly end up asking is this really necessary? Because with the exception of insects which deliberately lower their stealth as part of the aposematic coloration strategy, insects as a whole already have an above-average stealth, and are usually able to maintain this while still speccing into other equally impressive abilities.
That's
Their
facts.
camouflage can only take them so far. While they're near undetectable while remaining motionless, walking sticks still need to move to find food. And while they do mimic the movement of a swaying
And
leaf or branch, this certainly isn't perfect. In fact, if they're
That's
ever
so
caught in
crazy.
an environment where camouflage doesn't match as well, their instincts to sway and move can actually end up giving their position away even more, rather than aiding in their attempts to hide. Some phasmids do possess chemical defenses, but as we'll see further up the tier list, this attack is quite mild compared to the heat some other insects are packing. Phasmids have a similar game plan to sloths, complete with all the major flaws this strategy is riddled with. Although at least phasmids don't completely forego all common sense and make a dangerous trek to the forest floor once a week just to poop. Next in D
Step
tier,
buzz
we
ain't
have
really that.
Lepidopterans, the faction which includes moths, butterflies, and skippers.
Walking
At first
sticks are
glance,
pretty
these
free
may seem
too.
like absolute bottom tier builds. They're among the most vulnerable builds in the game when it comes to combat, with extremely squishy defensive stats and utterly abysmal offensive abilities. Many of the larval forms of these builds are 100%
Dang.
defenseless and have a mobility
You gone,
stat
buddy.
in single digits, literally the freest kills in the game. However, the Lepid player base is quite crafty and has come up with a few ways of at least sort of mitigating their many weaknesses. Caterpillars and adult lepids alike can adopt quite convincing disguises, some designed to help them blend in, and
That's
some
good.
designed to intimidate.
Oh,
Granted, these strategies
bro, that joint look like a snake. Nah, that's I ain't gonna lie, bro. I love animal videos and just learn about animals. And not only that, animals, as small as they be, to us at least, them joints be violent. Them joints violent, but I guess you got to if you want to survive, man.
them blend in.
I ain't gonna lie.
Some design
If I was an insect, I'm gonna go the other way too. This joint is creepy, especially looking up. Got the little intimidate joint off of Pokemon. That attack is definitely gonna be dropped for sure. They don't even got to worry about my attack getting dropped. I'm getting up out of it. I'm finding something else.
to
You know, like it's about to strike.
Granted,
And then
these
not.
strategies often don't hold up against high intelligence builds, but it does help. Some caterpillars spec into quite potent defenses, like spines and toxins, which make them simply not worth the potential damage to take on. And credit where credit is due, even though they still are fairly defenseless, butterflies and moths do have excellent mobility, and can fly much greater distances than most insect builds. This enables them to avoid high conflict areas of the map, and reach higher quality loot that might be too rare for most players to rely on. Their massive wings, in addition to being highly customizable for a variety of stealth or intimidation purposes,
Facts.
also just make them look much larger than insects of comparable body sizes.
Some of them be
which
looking
helps
scared when
dissuade
they open it
attacks.
up.
But ultimately, lepids still take plenty of L's, and most high-tier insect builds have quite oppressive matchups against them. So they're definitely a below-average faction. That's actually it for D
So-
tier, and I know it might seem like we're moving up the tier list quickly, but again, insects are a massively
So it'd
successful
really be only
faction
good for
and are
camouflage and
concentrated in the higher tiers.
intimidation.
At the bottom of C tier, we have the cockroach.
Roaches are C?
The cockroach
Oh,
is
yeah,
the
yeah,
ultimate
yeah.
survivor, which opted to
Yeah.
spec into mobility, stealth, and a multitude of elements.
Them roaches is hard to kill, bro. I was about to say roaches ain't in like DNF, but yeah, roaches, them joints insanely hard to kill. Defense gotta be on some like steel type Pokemon, cause them joints is durable.
Resistances
Holy.
in lieu of any offensive abilities. While they don't pack much heat, their flat shape
This
allows
nasty
them to easily
thing.
wedge themselves into locations that are extremely difficult for other players to attack them in. They're rather clumsy flyers, but they do have an above-average ground movement speed, enabling them to quickly scurry to cover if they see a predator player approaching. However, when caught out in the open or backed into a corner, they're fairly helpless and easily one of the most vulnerable builds in the entire insect faction. They're also somewhat carried by human mains, making temperate and tundra servers viable for them, because really, as impressive as their toxin and radiation resistance abilities are, they're quite vulnerable to the cold, and would still be mostly confined to jungle servers, if not for humans unlocking the
Please
fire
get that
control.
rush. Yes, sir.
The biggest variants may be able to tank 1 or 2 hits, but even then, with no way to fight back, they're still pretty screwed if they fail to outright escape a fight.
You don't really be
Next in C tier we have the Earwig, a fearsome-looking generalist build, which appears to have a giant pair of mandibles on its rear end, called Circe. As fearsome as these Circe forceps are, if we actually check the Earwig's base stats, we quickly notice that, just like all of its other stats, its power stat is actually quite mediocre. As menacing as the Circe are, the actual piercing damage they can deal is fairly minimal, and can even be deflected by the most basic of armor. And even against builds without armor, the damage is so low that larger builds still don't really need to be wary of approaching an Earwig, and can attack without restraint. Still, just because they can doesn't mean they do, as the Earwig's intimidation factor alone is oftentimes enough to protect it from conflict. And credit where credit is due, the forceps are actually fairly decent in matchups against soft-bodied insects, and allow
picking up like some forceps.
Targets much better than they could with their jaws.
You going, buddy?
While it may seem silly to have opted for rear-facing weapons instead of the more typical forward-facing ones like mandibles and rostrums, the position does actually serve a purpose, in that it allows Earwigs far greater access to burrows and tight spaces, where they can hide out and avoid conflict altogether. Of all of the weapons insects have access to, Circe might be some of the most unorthodox, which probably contributes to its ability to intimidate other players.
Eating them from the back?
I think to get out of mid-tier, Earwigs need to actually have the ability to back up their threat display. They would do well to spec into some sort of venom. Venom-infused stings are a fairly common attribute for insects, so this feels like a bit of a missed opportunity.
They don't got no venom?
Certainly a viable mid-tier, don't overestimate this build's abilities. At the top of C tier, we've got the Orthopterans, including grasshoppers, crickets, and katydids. These are the first mobility-centric builds on our list. While they're quite capable flyers, their true power comes
get a
from
little
their
closer, a little closer. Ah, there we go. Oh no,
Flight is an excellent defensive ability, as it allows the user to get out of reach of an attack's range.
Ain't that all the grasshopper got though?
Is lessened if their ability to get airborne has too much startup lag, and so instead of using their wings to get themselves up into the air, a powerful jump enables the Orthopteran mains to escape vertically at instant speed. Their excellent vision makes it extremely difficult to get within striking range without alerting them, and because their jump has such excellent frame data, landing an ambush strike on an Orthopteran can feel near impossible at times. And even if a player does manage to secure
like you just instant transmit
on an Orthopteran can feel near impossible at times. And even if
Hold on. Ain't no way. I gotta put this joint at 0.25.
landing an ambush strike on an Orthopteran can feel near impossible at times.
Dang, that joint still, I still couldn't catch it. That joint is fast, I ain't gonna lie. I feel like the grasshopper, all they got is just, like I said, vision, and be able to jump really high.
And even if a player does manage to secure a grab, their legs can function as quite an effective combo breaker. The spines on their legs augments the damage.
Oh yeah, there are different types. Okay.
Meaning that if a grasshopper can
I was thinking about a regular
of an ambush attack,
grasshopper,
they may be able to turn the tide of a confrontation and escape after dealing serious damage to the attacker. With that said, I think there are a few flaws in their strategy which I think keeps them out of the upper tiers. Grasshoppers can jump so far that there's really no way of knowing what sort of situation they're about to put themselves in. In a similar manner to the flying fish, using such a drastic escape option can sometimes end up putting you in a worse position than you were before.
Jump that around.
Especially if your local meta has a lot of spider players. And although they do present a challenge, most predator players aren't disrupted by the grasshopper's kicks, and can either tank the damage outright or one-hit the grasshopper before even
hardly doing nothing. I feel like the praying mantis are gonna be like S. Or A, whatever is the top.
With a few things in common, including generally having high defense and being somewhat shield-shaped. However, the most notable thing is that rather than slicing or pinching mouth parts, the Hypurz build opts for a piercing rostrum, perfect for puncturing through tough surfaces. For the majority of Hypurz builds, this allows them to
Oh yeah, I see that long
that
thing.
are normally hard to
Pause.
access, like the energy-dense sap inside trees and stems, or the starch inside
That boy
seeds.
hitting Giga Drain.
However,
That's
there are
crazy.
some Hypurz which use their sharp rostrum to deliver a venomous
Holy.
bite that is able to pierce through armored targets. Their venom is powerful enough to one-shot just about any other insect, and can even deal severe damage to larger builds. The only major shortcoming here is that these so-called assassin bugs tend to actually have fairly low stealth, opting for the aposematic intimidation defense I mentioned earlier. And on top of all that, they have fairly low mobility, making actually ambushing another player kind of difficult if they're actually paying enough attention to simply dodge the attack.
He don't got.
Some do break this trend though, and opt for both better camouflage and high aquatic mobility, making them some
Damn,
of the
took
most
down the.
fearsome aquatic
Oh, that's a big one. What the?
On the herbivore side of things, Hypurz tend to fare a bit worse. They usually still have fairly low mobility and low stealth, and their defenses may be higher than the average, but are nowhere near as impenetrable as some of the builds higher on this list. They tend to rely on a chemical defense similar to some phasmids, which is where they get the name stink bugs from. However, similar to phasmids, these defenses also tend to be a bit lacking, and often fail to deter attackers. So certainly a group with some standout members, and fine for XP farming, but still nothing too broken.
Nah, that's pretty good. Nah, that's a good.
And topping off B tier, we have
Good
the
build.
Neuroptera, a rather clumsy build with some pretty pathetic looking base stats. Genuinely one of the least agile flyers in the entire game. However, looking at the final form of this build paints a highly misleading picture of its capabilities. The larval form, which is the form they spend the vast majority of their time as, is a brutally
Ew.
effective predator build for any player who prefers the camping playstyle. Taking a look at the larva's stats, we see that they have incredibly high power and stealth for
Dang.
their size. Antlions have
Power
a
defense,
devastating
crazy.
venomous bite, which they use to one-shot unsuspecting players before draining all of their life points with their hollow jaws. Because
Holy.
of their ability to construct pitfall traps,
Detect.
their passive stealth rating is extremely high, making their ambush playstyle unbelievably effective. As if escape wasn't hard enough, once the prey gets caught in their trap, the antlion even has
Dead.
the ability to
Yeah,
launch
yeah, he done.
projectiles to stun its target.
Oh,
making
that's
escape
dirty.
a near impossibility. I have an entire video dedicated to the overpowered abilities of Neuropteran larvae, but in short, they are what the earwig pretends to be. If you took the earwig Circe, put them in front and made them sharper and gave them deadly venom to boot, you'd have an antlion. So why the weak adult form?
That would be
Having
broken.
spent all of their evolution points optimizing their larval form, they spend hardly any time at all as adults. They don't even have the ability to eat in this form, and really only exist to be a vessel that allows players to find each other and complete the mating questline, something they lack the ability to do in their much less mobile larval form. So while I do think it'd be more impressive if they didn't take such a massive cut to their power level during their final
This is so
level up,
interesting.
there's no denying that for the vast majority of their
I'm liking
playtime,
this video.
these builds are an absolute menace to encounter.
The menace. Dang, it's not
At the
S.
bottom of A tier, we have a personal favorite of mine, the
The
Mantis.
bottom of the A.
Mantises have a fairly straightforward playstyle consisting of slashing and grabbing their targets using powerful spiked raptorial forelimbs. If we take
Fast
a look at
as
the
hell.
Mantis' stats, we see that the Mantis has one of the highest base power stats of any non-venomous insect.
Heavy
It
hitter.
also has a stealth stat similar to that of a walking stick, which it desperately needs in order to be able
Nah,
to
if
get
a
these
praying
spiked
mantis had
targets.
venom,
Its clumsy
or some
flight
type
and
of
slow
poison?
ground movement speed makes chasing prey
Definitely S.
basically impossible. However, what they lack in movement speed, they easily make up for with strike speed. The Mantis' strike
Yeah.
is lightning quick, to the point that it's easily able to hit targets that are normally considered hopelessly evasive. As powerful as these strikes are, one weakness of the strategy is that the grappling attack doesn't immobilize the target, and actually brings them within range of a counterattack.
Not today,
And
boy.
while the Mantis' large size enables it to tank most counterattacks, attacking a venomous target can end up being a serious blunder for a Mantis player. So definitely a powerful high tier
Dang.
player, but not one that's so invincible that Mantis mains
Nah.
can get careless. Next in A tier we have the flies. This
He
does
thought he was
a
gonna
bit
get that
confusing
hornet.
due to
Nah.
the amount of other builds that use the word fly in their name. But this group, the true flies, are defined by a very specific feature. True flies
That's a lot
only
of
have
eyes.
2 wings. This might seem like a major trade-off, but while it does leave them more vulnerable to having their flight ability disabled from taking damage, the perk they unlock in return is more than worth the risk. Instead of a second pair of wings, flies swap them out for halteres, a sensory structure that grants flies an insanely powerful buff to their aerial maneuverability and their evasion. Their superior aerobatics make them all but impossible to land a hit on midair, and also enables
Man, that's
fly
annoying.
variants, such as the robber fly, to launch incredibly precise attacks mid-flight, and take down targets that would normally be too powerful to confront head-on, but are unable to effectively counterattack during flight.
Oh, snap. Oh.
However, most flies are either scavengers or parasites, using their quick mobility and superior reaction speed to weave past the defenses and avoid the sweeping counterattacks of larger players. While they do have
those
an
are some
extremely
pests.
short lifespan, there's no denying that they make the most of the time they do have, and are one of the most efficient and evasive builds in the entire game.
Them joints is
But while
hard.
flies are excellent aerial combatants, they are no match for the ultimate aerial hunter build.
Not only are they hard to hit, but they just annoying too.
Dragonfly is similar
Hell
to
no.
the Crocodile in that it is one of the most well-optimized PvP builds that has ever existed in the game.
Really?
It's already such an efficient build that across several balance patches and game expansions, the Dragonfly has seen very few changes to its core strategy. They simply aren't necessary, as the Dragonfly is already equipped to deal with just about anything the devs throw at it. So what is it about the Dragonfly that has given it such a competitive edge? Dragonflies
Sound
have
broken.
the best aerial maneuverability of any build in the game, and the highest top flight speed of any insect. Unlike most insects, dragonflies have spec'd into the ability to move their wings independently of each other, which grants them the ability to move in any direction without needing to turn and face that direction, meaning they can strafe mid-flight and even fly backwards. This ability makes their flight more energetically demanding than it is for other insects. So this is a high commitment, high reward playstyle.
That was a good catch.
In order to ensure a proper
That was
payoff for
good.
incredible agility, dragonflies have also spec'd into what is arguably the best vision of any arthropod. Extremely large, high-resolution eyes that take up basically their entire head, granting them full 360-degree vision.
Man got
This allows them to
32K
track all potential targets around them
quality.
with ease, and allows them to see attacks coming long before they're actually at risk of getting hit. Unlike many of the other builds on this list, which either have a powerful larval form but a weak adult form, or a powerful adult form that can only achieve this after enduring an extremely vulnerable early game, the dragonfly is a high-tier predator in both forms. While everyone knows they dominate the skies when they reach their max level, what you might not know is that as nymphs, dragonflies are one of the most vicious aquatic builds in the game, able to one-shot similarly sized fish and amphibian players.
Damn.
Now, while it was tempting to put dragonflies in S tier, they do have a few shortcomings.
Even early.
While they are generally able to see approaching predators before it's too late, they aren't particularly good at avoiding accidentally flying into dangerous situations. They're easily trapped by spiderwebs and are often snatched out of the air when flying too close to another player. In addition, dragonflies cannot walk, meaning that their energy-expensive flight ability is their only option if they need to reposition themselves. Not that devastating of a weakness, but it's enough that this ancient build can't
so who's-
quite break into S tier.
I really want to know what's an S. Oh yeah, B.
First in
Yeah,
S
B.
tier
Yeah,
we have
yeah.
the beetle.
Yeah.
The beetle is the epitome of the insect build. A bunch of
Strong,
extraordinarily powerful abilities
tanky.
that seem like they shouldn't
Yeah.
really function properly when used in conjunction with each other, yet somehow actually end up synergizing unbelievably well.
On some Snorlax
Beetles are
type
the
time.
premier tanks of the insect faction, with an outer cuticle sturdy enough to deflect just about any attack with ease. It has such a high AC that it can confidently plow through a swarm of aggressive ants without taking any damage, something that even many
HP
reptiles and
high.
amphibians can't get away with.
Defense super high.
Typically, when a build is heavily invested into defenses like this, it has to make a lot of sacrifices in its other stats. This is the opposite of
Trying
what
to
we
build
see
like
in the
a
beetle build,
Brinks truck.
as in addition to being the most heavily armored insect in the game, it also excels in several other metrics. The most obvious of which is its power stat. Beetles can obliterate their enemies in combat using powerful jaws and explosive chemical weapons. Their ability to bulldoze opponents with their forward-facing weaponry is hard to overstate, but in my opinion, their real damage potential comes from beetles which possess the ability to blast their attack.
got
with
special
a
attack
toxic
too?
or acidic
Holy!
chemical burst. But that's not where the craziness stops, because
Nah,
although
this-
you'd probably expect a high-power tank to be a slow, lumbering build, beetles also possess the top terrestrial movement speed of any insect.
Nah, they broken.
And if that weren't enough, despite often having heavy horns or giant mandibles, packing a tank full of noxious chemicals, being clad in heavy armor, and strapped with enough muscle to move objects
Nah,
far,
they
far
broken.
above their weight
Yeah.
class, the beetle is still able to fly without much issue. Now, they did sacrifice one of their sets of wings for additional armor, so they can't perform the advanced aerobatics that dragonflies and houseflies can. But the ability to get from point A to point B via flight is still extremely valuable, both for escaping danger and for reaching.
They got about everything, bro. This on some.
Beetles have essentially every ability they could ask for. They are an amalgamation of everything that makes the insect faction so powerful, and so it's no surprise that beetle species comprise a whopping 25% of all species in the game.
Wow.
They're so versatile and adaptable that a beetle player can find a niche in essentially any server. They truly are the ultimate insect and deserve a tier list of their own.
On some like Mega Mewtwo Y.
This combination of powerful abilities is, ultimately the beetle is still lacking the most powerful insect ability of them all.
Attack.
Eusociality. Now, I
Defense
have an
high.
entire video dedicated to explaining
Special
just
attack
how
high.
broken this
Speed.
ability is, and there's no question that the insects that incorporate it into their game plan simply dominate all in their path.
Termites.
Now, technically, termites are a variant of the cockroach build, but they have such a unique and powerful playstyle that lumping them in with mid-tier cockroaches seems disingenuous. The termite queen is the longest-lived insect in the game, with a lifespan near that of a human or elephant, and it spends these many decades building one of the most powerful armies the game has ever seen. These termite armies are able to construct some of the most well-fortified bases in the game,
Insane.
giving even beaver dams and human skyscrapers a run for their money.
That's insane.
Not only do they build incredible bases, but termites literally
See how
transform
big
the map
that thing
in order
is,
to better
bro?
optimize their colony's ability to gather resources.
And just organized,
They can
too.
pave paths and build ramps and bridges to important resource deposits. This efficiency allows them to support a huge army and command vast territories. Termites, despite being most closely related to cockroaches, have a
Big
combat
brains,
style
bro.
that is actually most similar to the spitting cobra, which, if you've seen my snake tier list, you'd know is also a top tier build. Termites can accurately fire acid from a needle-like horn on their face, dealing heavy damage to anything caught in its blast.
That I ain't know.
Some termites opt for giant slicing jaws instead of acid sprayers on their head, and are crucial for defending their base from an onslaught of invaders. Termites are a somewhat imbalanced build, with crazy powerful forward-facing weaponry, but extremely vulnerable abdomens with no armor at all. This means that oftentimes, despite a larger size, they are quickly overwhelmed if they get outnumbered and flanked. Not usually an issue, as termites are proficient at defending in a phalanx formation which covers the weak points of individual members. So certainly not a bad enough weakness to negate the top tier status of eusociality. But this weakness does mean that I gotta give the top spot to the other eusocial insect faction.
Which is?
Hymenoptera is the group of insects that includes ants, bees, and wasps. Unlike termites, these insects are a bit more well-rounded, having decent armor all over, and tend to have both forward and rear-facing weaponry, with most hymenopterans packing strong jaws and a venomous stinger. The wasp's signature buzz and yellow banding are so infamous that almost every other insect faction in the game has at least a few members trying to replicate it to gain advantage on their own intimidation checks. Eusocial hymenopterans can build extremely complicated structures without the use of tools. They can launch organized attacks containing thousands of combatants. They can capture prisoners, cross major barriers, and control territory to an absolutely incredible degree. Thousands of players will lay down their lives in defense of a colony if need be. Ants in particular are masters of both empire building and military tactics, often having to wage war on multiple fronts while undertaking large construction and agricultural projects in their own territory. So, while beetles may take up a larger
ants are the
total insect
epitome of
areas,
just jumping, no one-on-ones.
both vastly outnumber any other insect build. And while I don't base my tier lists purely off of population, there's no denying that the abundance of these insects is due to their incredibly powerful strategies and their ability to bend their environment to their advantage. In fact, the only genuine threats to you social players tend to be invaders disguising themselves as members of their own colony, but are really there to disrupt, steal, and attack. Many spider, hemiptera, and mantis mains adopt the strategy, and are incredibly successful in doing so. As the ant troops forge and
Kingdom like a freaking war zone.
Weave their way into their ranks.
All right, fellas, that's the insect tier list. Like I said, this is my first time watching the channel. This channel is fire. I think this is subscribe certified. This is definitely a channel that I highly recommend y'all checking out. So much so that we may have to look at some more of these, fellas. You know what I'm saying? If y'all are interested, that's something y'all want to see. Okay. And I ain't gonna lie, I didn't really expect. I knew that ants was up there, but I didn't know it was up there like that to the S, like #1. Yeah. That I did not know. But yeah, I always enjoy learning about animals. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, you already know what to do. Quaymax, aka Quay. And I'm out.